Okay, great. Now that we've got our business put together, our forms done, our presentation book put together, we can actually go out and start showing people what we do and start getting restaurants and advertising clients. So the first thing that you have to do is find a local restaurant that will use and display the chalkboard. And notice I said find, not convince. It's not really your job to talk people into taking the chalkboard. Most restaurants that like it will just automatically want one, and we get about half of the restaurants that we show it to. So don't worry too much about the ones that you don't get. And of course the boards are completely free, so it's a really simple and easy process getting the restaurant to place the board, because all we ask the restaurant owner to do is to display the board for 2 years so the advertisers get good value, and just sign the restaurant agreement so that if any of the advertisers have a question that we're actually doing it, we have something that we can show the advertiser. And then, once the owner agrees to these terms, then, just sit down with them and explain to them how the process is going to work. And this is also how we go about getting the referrals as well. So here's how I typically set up a restaurant. I don't worry too much about getting to the owner. As soon as I walk in the door, I don't want to be one of those guys that walks in and say, hey, I'd like to speak with the owner. Just whoever approaches me first, whether it's a waiter, waitress, cashier, I explain to them what I'm doing. I say, hey, we give away custom erasable chalkboards like this one, and I'll either show them the demo board or the presentation book. And I say there's absolutely no cost whatsoever to you because they're sponsored by a few local businesses. Who would I speak to see if you'd like one for your restaurant? And of course, they're going to go get the owner. But they've already seen what you're doing and they already like it. And when they tell you who's responsible for that, you just say, great, is that person available? Now, instead of going in the back and saying, hey, Joe, there's another salesman out here to see you, they go in the back and say, hey, Joe, come here. You got to see these really nice chalkboards this guy has. And it's a completely different mindset. So I like to just show whoever greets me at the door, whoever asks if they can help me, show them the board. Everybody loves it. Explain that there's no charge, and just ask them who would make that decision. So once you get in front of the actual decision maker, same thing. Hey, Joe, I was just telling your cashier we provide custom erasable message boards like this one, no cost whatsoever. The reason that they're no cost is we let local businesses sponsor the board, so it's absolutely free to you. And we can customize it with your logo at the top along with any other information that you'd like. And all we ask is that you use it for 2 years so that the advertisers get good value. Is that fair with you? And then you just shut up and listen to the response. Usually they'll say something like, what's the catch, or what do I have to do? Or if they're not interested, they'll tell you that as well. So if they like the board and they'd like to have one, go through this process to get referrals. Don't just say, hey, I'd like to get some referrals, because that turns people off and it's hard to think of referrals when you ask it that way. We have a list of categories on the location agreement, so we make this real easy for you just to have a conversation. And here's the way I do it. I just have this conversation with the restaurant owner once they say that they'd like to have the board. I say, great. Now, obviously we wouldn't advertise any other restaurants on there. That wouldn't be fair to you. But we also make sure that the boards are what I call kid-friendly. That is, we don't promote any business that all your customers wouldn't be comfortable with. No adult-themed businesses or bail bonds, things like that. Is there anybody else in particular that you wouldn't want to see on the board? I think this is a good question. Most of the time they say no, anybody else is fine, but sometimes the guy will say, well, my ex-wife just opened up a t-shirt shop down the street and I sure don't want to see her on there. So if there is somebody in town that they wouldn't be comfortable having on the board, this is a good time to ask that. But typically, they just say no. Anybody else is fine. And now this is where you get the referrals. Then you say, great. Now let's talk about who you would like to see. Who do you bank with? Who does your insurance? Who takes care of your pest control? Who's your realtor? Where do you buy cars? When your car breaks, who fixes it? Where do you get tires? And you just have this conversation and you just hit the categories that are on the location agreement. And before you know it, in 5 minutes, you've got 12 or 15 referrals. And that's the way to do the business. Do it with referrals. If you just have this conversation and get plenty of referrals, you'll never have to make a cold call. And if you do it this way, you don't have to ask for referrals. You just have a conversation about who the restaurant owner would like to see on the board. So a couple of tips for getting restaurants. Like I said in the beginning, don't worry about convincing anybody. If they don't want a board or don't like it, there's not much that you can say to change their mind. So just ask them. We get about half of the ones that we show it to. Take the half that you get. Don't worry about the rest. Sometimes you really can't get referrals, but you want to do the restaurant anyway. For whatever reason. It's a really busy restaurant and you think it would be easy to sell. If that's the case, we subscribe to a list company, and we can give you lists of businesses that are potential advertisers within a mile or two of the restaurant. So in the last section, in the shortcuts and tips section, I'll explain how to get those lists. Also, don't get too hung up on the time of day to talk to restaurant owners. A lot of companies will tell you don't call on restaurants at meal times. I've not ever found that to be a problem. Some of the best restaurants that I've set up were straight up 12 o'clock, and the owner was working the cash register, taking money while I was showing the chalkboard. So don't get too hung up on what time of day you're trying to talk to these folks. And besides that, if it's not mealtime, a lot of these people try to leave. They go to the bank, they go to the post office, they find reasons to leave the restaurant. So it's actually sometimes a better time to find them during meal times. Sometimes the restaurant will tell you that they don't do specials, and in that case, I've done boards for restaurants to sell appetizers or desserts or t-shirts or hats, whatever. Usually there's something that they can use the board for, even if they don't do daily specials or discounts or things like that. So, and there'll be more tips for setting up the restaurants in the bonus section at the end. But next comes the fun part, getting the advertisers and getting paid. So thanks for listening.